Hi, welcome back to our channel, or welcome to our channel. If you're a new subscriber, that's probably why you're watching this video now. Christopher, you're going to share some background so that people get a better idea of who we are, why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, um, I don't know. I guess I could just jump on in. It's kind of sometimes it's difficult to talk about myself. However, I could start where did this my journey with inside of myself start. It didn't start when uh, it didn't start a long time ago, but it started in the year 2000. It was around April and May, and I had was in a place close to the Hollywood racetrack off of Myrtle. And I was going to get that last dime rock because I was smoking in those days. And all of a sudden the police passed me and they kept going and they stopped me. They asked me some questions and they let me go. And all of a sudden I get to the street Myrtle in Inglewood, and here comes the police. And all of a sudden they pull up on me and they ask me what was I doing, and they start searching me. Well, I had a rock in my glove, and they took the rock, and right then in that one moment, I'm talking to myself in this dialogue that says, well, here I am, my life has no purpose, no meaning. I just felt like a real failure right there at that one moment. And I said, well, now I'm going to do 5 years in the state penitentiary for possession of a controlled substance. And I said, oh, wow. I said, I don't want to be locked up again. I don't want to be locked up. I'd already did 2 years in the state penitentiary for possession that wasn't mine. So now here it is. They got me with something that was mine, and I'm looking at 5 years. Because usually when you go to prison, if you don't learn your lesson, and I didn't realize what addiction was. And there I was standing on that corner, cold, alone, and wanting just to die, really. Just wanted to die. And I said, well, how am I going to die before I go into the prison? And all of a sudden, another thought invaded that conversation I was having with myself. And it said, you won't see one day in the state penitentiary. Well, I was trying to figure out, well, I don't have enough money to get a lawyer. Johnny Cochran had passed. I said, well, how am I gonna get out of this? But that voice was like with assurance and with a clarity that I had never known, or that I had never paid attention to. Because once I started doing the journey within, I had seen many times in my life that voice, or that thought, with clarity and with compassion, would come in and say, you won't see one day in the state penitentiary. Well, I was trying to figure out how I could help that situation. Well, it wasn't until the April when I went to court, they say that you can go to rehab, to Arena B. And when I went into the Arena B, I said, wow, I was filled with resistance. I was filled with rebellion, and I said, well, I'm not going to change who I am. And I used to go through the Alcoholics Anonymous group when I was living on Colden, and they had a meeting hall. And I used to go through the front door and through the back door and out the front door, go down to Figueroa to continue, using substance. And when I got to the Arena B, I said, well, I'm not going to get in there and say my name is Christopher, I'm an alcoholic, because, no, that's not what I am. So when I went in, I would go up to the podium in the rehab and say, well, my name is Christopher and I'm a human being. I was very adamant about being a human being. I said, that's what I am. So how I looked at myself. And I had this one counselor, he just said, just identify as an alcoholic. I said, no, that's not what I am. I don't believe in myself to be that. And so one day I was standing up there at the podium and I said, my name is Christopher and I am an alcoholic. That gave me some freedom from what I thought I knew about myself to be able to investigate about myself. And the fast forward, after I got out of Arena B, I started to go to meetings and talk to other people. And I had a sponsor, his name was Rocky Ficklin. And Big Rock says, I have a job for you, Christopher Mack. I said, well, what kind of job do you have for me? Because I thought I was going to go to school and continue working in the electronic data field, because data processing was my trade. So I said, oh, okay. So he said, I want you to be an outreach worker in Skid Row. And I said, okay. Well, he said, I want you. So I went down and I applied for the job. And my first job with the healthcare clinic that I work with, I'm not going to mention them because I think I wouldn't want to put that in there. But the health clinic, the people who know me know what health clinic I'm talking about. I've been with them for 18 years. I am also 19 years sober. But when I got downtown, he says, well, we want you to do surveys. That was when the term, the downloads, and I used to do HIV surveys to find out, part of the JWCH or part of the clinic I work for. Part of the mission statement is for research and education. And so when I was doing those surveys, well, downtown, there was a big recovery community. I had a friend, his name was Kevin Michael, and he would say that Skid Row was the world's largest recovery community. That doesn't matter about the substance. As sometimes we think that recovery is only for those people, but I gotta assure you that addiction can touch anybody. It doesn't have to be substance. Addiction is obsessive compulsive behavior, and it's a disorder. But most people think addiction, you have to be using something, but you don't have to be using anything. It hinges and bases on, basically, it's about behavior. How do I act in certain situations and certain conditions? There's a social situation going on and I'm not a part of it. I'm antisocial. I don't like to be around people. I don't like people being around me. If you don't think the way I think, if you aren't acting the way I'm acting, then I could become a bad actor. That was last week. But when I started downtown in the afternoons at lunchtime, the organization, the VOA, used to have recovery meetings. And so we would go to the meetings and, we would use the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as a guide and as a guidepost. And one day I was out after a meeting, I just found out that I wasn't thinking about anything. And I started to look and tried to come up with a thought, but it didn't come. And so we continued to have meetings, and even when the VOA moved, we went over to the tea house and kept those meetings going. I had a partner, his name was JJ. And so we had the afternoon meeting, but we would call our meeting the dynamics of recovery. And in the dynamics of recovery, what started to occur is you started to get these moments of clarity, of observation. I like to call them the aha moment. The moment that addresses, whatever it is that you're looking at, but it addresses it not superficially, but it addresses it in an in-depth way because you feel it. You don't only you don't only think about it, but there's this feeling that goes along with it. And usually this is a feeling of freedom where you're liberated from some idea that you used to hold dear. And now you can just let it go. And so you have that freedom. Part of what I begin to notice about recovery is that there is a amount of freedom that starts to occur in the individual without his help. And so we understand that that freedom comes from a power that's greater than ourselves, when lifelong notions seem to just fall off and you let go. So the group ran for about 11 years. And the dynamics of recovery is what JJ and I started to see, things that start to happen to our lives. You know, this freedom that we began to get, and this happiness that we began to get, just as the big book promised. But a lot of times people were in resistance and rebellion to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of people, you know, had their own ideas that, you know, nobody's going to tell me about God, and nobody's going to, you know, make me do something that I don't want to do. You know, we sometimes, you know, there's a stubbornness about us as people. We want to do what we want to do when we want to do it, and how we want to do it, and nobody's going to tell us anything different. And you don't have to even have a substance problem to have that type of attitude. And so when the idea, the emotion, and the attitude, those are things that dominate us. When they're cast aside and a new set of principles come in and start to guide our lives, we begin to be liberated from I thought I was that guy. I thought I was that girl. I thought I was that man. I thought I was that woman. I thought, you know, so many things that we think about ourselves. And sometimes we think so highly of ourselves, we forget, you know, that somebody once told me, say, Chris, there's always going to be somebody who's more beautiful. There's always going to be somebody who's more smart. There's always going to be somebody who's more handsome. You know, and so this competition that you have with other people is kind of like nonsense. And so the journey within is taking a look, going past the superficial me, and trying to see what I'm really about, who I really am. I'm not the wounds. I'm not, you know, attitude that I adopt from because I'm trying to be better than somebody else or put somebody down. But it's just a place where I can live free and be natural.
The journey to really learn about yourself. I met Christopher 10 years ago, and he had a dream to lead. Well, he was already leading his own dynamics of recovery groups, but he wanted to have a specific program. So I created a 10-week program, which we piloted downtown on Skid Row for a couple of years. Several times a week, we'd go down there. And then from that, decided to I need to turn this into a book. There's only so many people we can reach, you know, in the weekly meetings. So we turned it into a book, and now this is our YouTube channel to promote that. My background is education and psychology. So I've written social emotional programs and curriculums, and so that's what my background is. It was a good match with Christopher's. Although I didn't know his world, I attended several of those meetings and filled notebooks of stuff, and he was a good teacher for me. So this book is based upon all of Christopher's work and me putting it into a usable, hopefully friendly, very friendly format for people of any educational background. We try to keep it, you know, clean, simple, short, manageable for people. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda. It was, yeah, it's not about telling somebody what it is they need, you know, just at the buffet. Come to the table. If you like the bread that you're eating, you know, you're always invited to make a comment, to talk about something that you've discovered about yourself. It's about each individual discovering themselves. I don't know what your story is. I don't know what's happened to you in your life. I don't know anything, but I do know that the answer to whatever has happened is within inside of us. And everything that we need to know and want to know about this life is inside of us. And it only takes, turning that little inch to go within. I was listening to a channel where a sad guru said that we don't know where up or down is or left or right. We think we do. It's only in reference to maybe a location. But there are two things that we do know. We know what is in and what is out. And that's the two things that we really know. Everything else is a guess. I don't know whether the earth is pointed down or up. When I look up in the sky, I don't know. So, we live on this ball, but I do know that inside of myself, there is this wonderful world. There's this wonderful idea that, I am something other than a history of, of, of of sadness and hurt and pain and rejection and all of those things that we seem to hold dear because we're out of touch. So I was out of touch with myself, and I didn't realize how beautiful and wonderful I am without being egocentric.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christopher Mack.
You're welcome.